Will you persevere in persecution? That is our question for today. And can you prepare? Is there anything that can be done for the day that persecution comes so that we will persevere? So that is our focus. I am Dr. Andrew Marquez, and this is the Baptist on the Bible podcast. Here is your 7 at 7 devotion, and today we're digging into the concluding portion of the fiery furnace. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 3, verses 19 through 23, and we're going to zero in on the punishment that Nebuchadnezzar enacts for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And in the midst of everything that's gone on, the day comes when persecution arrives at the door. And what can you do other than pray for God to help you be faithful, to make it through? So let's read these verses together and just keep that in mind. Are you ready for persecution if it in fact comes? So beginning at verse 19, it says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. These men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound, into the midst of the burning fiery furnace." And that is where we will stop for today. The persecution has come, and it has certain features about it that might be typological. They might be foreshadowing of persecution that may come to you someday, or to those that you know or pray for or love. The persecution in this instance is accompanied by rage. Nebuchadnezzar gave one last chance for these men to bow to his statue. They refused, and he is enraged. The words say his face changed towards them. And it's not just any rage, it is an irrational rage. Nebuchadnezzar is upset. He is so upset that he has heated the furnace 7 times its normal heat. There might be some sort of connection here, maybe in the Bible, to Proverbs 24:16. It says that 7 times a righteous man may fall and rise again, but the wicked shall fall by calamity. That there is a preservation for God's people that's not available to those that are unrighteous. And so we have this kind of contrast between Nebuchadnezzar's attempt to destroy these 3 by 7 times the heat and God's preservation. And so we will see that next time, what happens to these men. But Nebuchadnezzar is irrational. He gets his mightiest men to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And why does he need his mighty men of valor to do this? He is trying to make an example perhaps of them, to show that there is no escape from his wrath when you refuse the king's order. So he gets his strongest men to bind these 3, and then there's an urgency. They leave the garments on the men. That might provide some kind of kindling. It's not necessarily good for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but they move so quickly, the urgency, it does not allow the mighty men to protect themselves, and they are actually killed by the heat of this flame, this furnace. And the heat tells us that the deaths of these men reveal that there is a reality to this. We have a rage, an irrationality, an urgency, and a reality that this is hot. It's not as though Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego may survive some sort of underheated furnace. No, this is so hot it killed those that are casting these 3 into the furnace. And likely this furnace was built into a mountainside, and there was a furnace opening at the top for exhaust and a door at the front. And so you kind of envision Nebuchadnezzar and his men are looking through the door, maybe in the front or the opening there, and the men are being cast in from the top. But the flame, perhaps a gust could blow and cause the heat to hit those casting in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And you have this vision that the men are killed and they drop the 3 and they fall down into the fiery furnace. Well, what do we do with this? What do we do? Is there anything that we can do as Christians, as believers, to be ready for the persecution that comes? Certainly there will be a moment when you recognize persecution or hardship, punishment for your faith is at hand. And one of the advantages that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had is they were given one last ultimatum. They refused it, and then things moved quickly. So there was no opportunity to recant at that point in time. It moved quickly, it moved fast, and in the midst of all of it, all they could do then is trust themselves to God. Are you prepared for the day that that might come? You know, Mother Teresa is just a great example of a wonderful woman of faith who endured persecution, hardship, suffering much of her life in her ministry. There's a story of Mark Hatfield, who was a senator, who went and visited the House of Dying. And this was a place where children went that weren't going to survive, and those that just needed help. And Mother Teresa would serve these people. And it was just a service that ultimately often ended in death. And Senator Hatfield said to Mother Teresa one day, "How can you bear the load without being crushed by it?" And her answer was, "My dear Senator, I am not called to be successful. I am called to be faithful." In the midst of everything that's going on, when persecution, hardship, suffering comes, are you faithful? Are you trusting in God? Are you relying on Him? In the midst of it all, that's all we can do when the day comes. And we know that salvation is available on the other side. And we can't forget that the last words of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were, "Our God will save us. But even if He doesn't, we will not bow down to your statue. We will be faithful." I hope that encourages you, that you're blessed. If you would take some time to either rate this podcast or just share it, either video, like it, whatever you would like to do, it would help me continue to make more of these and just keep getting the word out. And perhaps there's someone that would be blessed by this message if you would just take the time to share it. I hope you will. Have a great week. Thanks.